Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome. It's good to see so many people that have come and attended. Okay, we've got a couple more people joining. Good. Okay. So those of you that have already joined us, hi, good evening. Yep, thank you for joining us. Yes, so the way this evening is going to work is we'll just go through a presentation very quickly of how English is structured in the English department in secondary. I will present in English. Mr. Ng will then present in Mandarin, and Miss Azreen will also do it in Malay, just so that everybody has an idea of what's going on. So we've got kind of the trilingual approach going. At the end, there'll be a time if you have any questions. So please, if you have any questions, please feel free to send them in the chat, or we have a moment at the end where you can just ask some questions as well. So we just got a couple more people joining before we get started. There we go. Okay, yeah, so just for anybody that's joined, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to get started in a moment. I've got some slides to just give you an overview of how the English department and how English works in secondary. And then after I've done my short bit of presentation, Mr. Ng will present in Mandarin, Ms. Azreen in Malay, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll have some time for some questions. If you have any other questions, please do send them in the chat, and we'll try to answer them as we go through. Okay, I make it about 5 o'clock, so we can get started. If anybody else joins us, we'll try to catch them up. So, as mentioned, this is kind of a description of how the English department and how English works at Tenby. Hi. Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, so first of all, how is English structured? Obviously, we are leading up to the IGCSE. All of our courses in Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 lead up to the IGCSE. IGCSE is divided into literature in English and English language. That might be first language English, or it might be English as a second language. So we have those two options. The end goal is that all students will do first language and literature. Obviously, if students are not doing that, then they may be doing English as a second language, or they may not do literature. English language and English literature focus on developing the same skills. This is first language or English as a second language. We're really developing the same skills, which is essentially critical textual analysis and structuring a response. These two skills are kind of the overview of what we need for English language, ESL, first language, and for literature. So it's the exact same set of skills. All schools that I've ever spoken with, all schools I've ever worked at, they teach English language and English literature simultaneously because they are intertwined, inextricable, and overlapping. You cannot separate these two subjects. They are equally codependent. In the language paper, you need to write narratives. We can't write a narrative unless we're familiar with literary texts. They go hand in hand. So I'm going to pass to Mr. Ng now to kind of explain in Mandarin, and then I'll pass over to Ms. Azreen.
Thank you, Mr. Edward. I'm Mr. Ng, so I'm the head of academics, and I will be explaining a little bit more in Mandarin. And there we go. 所以呢，各位家长下午好啊，傍晚好。那么我是 Mr. Ng 啦，相信大家对我也不陌生。那么我这里主要会用通过中文这个语言呢，去给大家稍微讲解，让大家更加了解。那么在我们中学这边呢，英语是一个怎么样的？作为一个科目是一个怎么样的里面的细节吧。那么我们的英语文学呢，分为文学以及语言的部分。那么包括语言呢，就会作为第一语言以及作为第二语言呢，就像刚才 Mr. Edward 所指的一样。那么英语英文文学呢，注重培养训练相同的技巧，也就是文章分析以及回答技巧。那么相关的学习呢，同时也会教导，也就是说，我们的孩子们呢，在学英语文学的时候呢，同时也会学习英语的语言技巧以及英文文学。那么因为这两者之间呢，他们都是承上启下，他们也是相辅相成的。OK， 好吗？那么如果你们有什么问题的话，你们可以稍微记录一下。你们可以通过中文在我们 presentation 完了之后呢，就是发问题，那么我会给大家做一个解答，好吗？那我就传给 Miss Ashrin 啊，Miss Ashrin，over to you。
Hai Mr. Eng, terima kasih. Okey, selamat sejahtera semua. So berdasarkan apa yang Mr. Edward beritahu, so IGCSE English terbagi kepada 2 subjek komponen iaitu sastra Inggeris dan juga bahasa Inggeris sebagai bahasa utama. So kita ada 2, sastra Inggeris dikenali sebagai bahasa utama dan bahasa Inggeris sebagai bahasa kedua. So subjek sastra Inggeris dan subjek bahasa Inggeris fokus dalam membangunkan kemahiran yang sama, analisis teks yang sama, analisis teks yang lebih kritis dan strukturkan kemahiran yang tindak balas yang sama. So kedua-dua subjek komponen ini mereka akan belajar kemahiran asas dan kemahiran kompleks yang sama. Mr. Edward juga dia menyatakan yang setiap sekolah mengajar subjek sastra Inggeris dan subjek bahasa Inggeris secara serentak. Mr. Edward juga ada menyatakan yang kedua-dua subjek komponen ini saling berkait antara satu sama lain dan mereka tidak boleh dipisahkan. Jadi pelajar perlu belajar dua komponen ini dalam masa yang sama. Back to you, Mr. Edward.
Thank you so much, both of you. So those of you that have just joined us, we're just running through how the English department works. I'm kind of giving you a bit of a rundown in English. Mr. Ong is explaining in Mandarin, and then Miss Azreen is explaining in Malay. So just to again recap very quickly, we have both English language and English literature. For the English language, that is ESL, English second language, and first language English, IGCSE. And these two courses are very much intertwined. So moving on. While we do use literature texts as our main texts, we also do study a variety of non-literary and non-fiction texts. This is for the English language course. There are no set texts for English language. It's completely skills-based. All of the texts that they do in the exam are unseen, so they've never seen them before. So even though we do focus on the literature texts, we do use and include lots of language texts as well. Each year in English, students study the 3 literary texts as well as a series of non-literary, non-fiction texts. These would be things such as newspapers, magazines, letters, speeches, journals. These are all required for the first language English or English as a second language course. And also by studying both literature and language, we develop these whole host of skills, including analyzing a text, how to structure a response, how to write coherently and cohesively, how to skim and scan for information, reading effectively, composition skills, etc., etc. So all of these skills are developed throughout literature and language. Even though it may look like we're only studying literature, when we are studying the literary texts, we are developing skimming and scanning skills. We're developing how to analyze a text. Those are both language skills as well. So I'll pass you now to Mr. Ng.
Thank you, Mr. Edward. 所以刚才 Mr. Edward 有提到呢，在我们专注学习文学文本的同时呢，我们也海量阅读多元的非小说性质的文章。那么英语呢，因为它是属就英语和华语、马来语是一样的，是属一种技巧性的语言学习。所以呢，在这种语言学习上面呢，没有一个指定的文本，它不像是数学或者是科学一样，就是我们从第1单元学到第5单元呢，我们就考这5个单元，而是它是比较广泛的。所以它更多的时候呢，是专注在技巧性，就是我们在训练孩子们啊，怎么样去回答啊，怎么样去分析文章啊，怎么样去回答那篇文章了。然后每一年呢，修读英语的学生呢，将会在文学课的时候呢，阅读3篇文学性质文本的同时呢，那么我们也会确保他们呢，在英语课的时候啊，修读一系列的非文学性质、非小说性质的文章。那么这也包括呢，比如说报章上面的文章、杂志上面的文章、书信、演讲稿以及一些学术性文章了。那么同时阅读文学以及语言呢，学生会学习如何分析文章，解构所谓的问题，有结构性以及系统性的书写，这也包括了概括以及寻找重要的资讯。那么这会更有效的帮助他们阅读和概述技巧等等。Over to you, Miss Azreen.
Thank you very much. Mr. Edward ada menyatakan walaupun mereka belajar teks sastra sebagai petikan utama dalam mata pelajaran mereka, mereka juga mengkaji pelbagai jenis teks. Teks ini adalah teks daripada teks bukan fiction dan juga teks bukan sastra. So tidak ada teks yang ditetapkan dalam subjek bahasa Inggeris sebab mereka belajar dua komponen ini berdasarkan kemahiran sepenuhnya. Setiap tahun juga pelajar yang mengambil subjek ini akan belajar 3 jenis teks sastra, tapi bukan sahaja mereka belajar 3 jenis teks sastra, mereka juga belajar siri bukan sastra dan siri bukan fiction. Pelajar akan dapat teks atau petikan daripada surat khabar, daripada majalah, daripada ucapan maupun surat dan juga jurnal. Dengan belajar kedua-dua komponen iaitu sastra Inggeris dan juga bahasa Inggeris, pelajar dapat meningkatkan kemahiran mereka di mana mereka boleh menganalisa teks, mereka boleh mengimbas teks, mereka boleh mencari maklumat-maklumat terperinci ataupun mereka boleh menulis dengan lebih koheren dan juga padu. Teknik pengibasan juga penting dalam belajar kedua-dua subjek ini. Mereka dapat mencari isi-isi tersurat dan tersirat dalam petikan yang mereka baca. Pelajar dapat membaca petikan secara efektif dan mereka juga akan belajar teknik gubahan dan teknik-teknik yang lain lagi. Back to you, Mr. Edward.
Thank you so much, guys. Having a look just at some of the results we've had in the last year. In June 2022, 91% of students taking English language achieved an A to a C. This is 12% higher than the global average. Obviously, with the IGCSE, it tends to be international schools that take it. So we're doing very, very well with that first grade. 34% of students taking English language achieved an A or an A star in English language. This is about the same as the global average, but as you can see, this is quite a high number still. 100% of students taking English literature achieved A to C, which is again 10% higher than the global average. And finally, 50% of students taking English literature achieved A or A star, which is again about the global average. These are all for international schools. So over to you, Mr. Ng.
Thank you, Mr. Edward. 所以呢，以我们学校的英语成绩来说呢，这个是我们参考2022年，也就是今年6月刚刚考完的那个英语成绩呢，包括了英语第一语言、英语第二语言以及英文文学的成绩了。那么我们的学生呢，我们可以很自豪的说，我们学生呢都达到了以下的目标，包括了91%的英语第一语言的学生呢，考获了至少 A star 到 C 等级的成绩。这是如果我们以全球总平均相比的话，这是高于总平均12%的。那么第二点呢，是34%的英语考生呢，考获了至少 A 或者 A star 的等级。那么这与全球的总平均呢是相同的。那么来到第三点呢，是100%的英语考生，就是我们所有的考生呢，都至少考获了 A star 到 C 的等级，这是高于全球总平均的18%。那么来到最后呢，就是全部考生都考获 A 或 A star 的，这个是给予这个英文文学的科目。那么我们占了我们总考生的58%，这是全部 A and A star 的成绩。那么这与全球总平均相比的话呢，将会是相同的，好吗？那么我再交给 Miss Asrin。Miss Asrin, over to you.
Terima kasih. Sebelum saya mulakan, saya minta maaf ada kesalahan ejaan dekat pelajar dan juga Tenby SEH. So dekat sini kami mahu menyatakan dan 91% pelajar yang mengambil jurusan bahasa Inggeris mendapat grade antara A dan juga C, di mana grade ini adalah 12% lebih tinggi daripada kadar purata global seluruh dunia. Dan 34% pelajar yang mengambil bahasa Inggeris mencapai grade A ataupun grade A star, sama dengan kadar purata global. 100% pelajar yang mengambil bahasa Inggeris mencapai grade A hingga C, 10% lebih tinggi daripada kadar purata global dunia, dan juga 50% pelajar yang mengambil kesusastraan bahasa Inggeris iaitu sastra bahasa Inggeris mencapai grade A atau A star, sama dengan kadar purata global. Terima kasih. Back to you, Mr. Edward.
Thank you so much. So yes, as you can see, we're very, very proud of these results, and they have come out very, very strong across the board. Okay, so just running back, just to give you a rundown of each year group. Year 7 do The Jungle Book, Romeo and Juliet, and Poetry Through the Ages, a collection of poetry, as well as a variety of non-literary and non-fiction texts. Students, they see that we are doing The Jungle Book in term 1, Romeo and Juliet term 2, and Poetry Through the Ages term 3. These are not the only texts that we do throughout the year. We do actually include lots of non-literary and non-fiction texts for the language paper, as well as using The Jungle Book, Romeo and Juliet, and Poetry Through the Ages to practice language skills. Okay. Again, similarly, if we look at year 8, we have Holes, Macbeth, Poisonous Poetry, and non-literary non-fiction. Year 9, Animal Farm, Streetcar Named Desire, Pop and Poetry, as well as non-literary and non-fiction. Year 10 do Life of Pi, Journey's End, Songs of Ourselves, as well as non-literary non-fiction. And year 11, students prepare for the exams that they are going to sit. Very importantly, students finalize which exams they are going to take after the mocks in January. So students will lead up to the mocks. If they are between exams, they will take several mocks to see which they are best prepared for. And then we will ensure that they are sitting the correct exam. As you can see, each year we do one fiction, one novel, one play, and one poetry collection as required for the literature GCSE. So over to you, Mr. Ng.
好的，所以 Mr. Edward 刚才提到呢，就是说我们并不是只是说从10年级才开始训练我们的学生就是我们当然我们都明白，作为老师，我们作为一个教育团队都明白说，家长们、孩子们最关心的其中一个点呢，当然就是11年级的那个大考嘛，就是 IGCSE 这个考试。所以我们可以看见这边就是从7年级开始呢，我们就为学生们就是准备。那么你可以看到这里各种各样的书籍了嘛，这个是直译的那个名字，那么更准确的你们可以参考英文的那个书本的名字，包括了这边有森林王子，然后有罗密欧与朱丽叶，还有包括了这个古往今来，好吧，以及一些就是刚才我们提到英语里面会学习的非文学性的非文学性质以及非小说性质的文章了。那么来到8年级也是一样，那么我们就是以此类推，一直到10年级、11年级之后呢，所以我们更准确来讲是在11年级的时候呢，因为很多家长都担心说，哎，我的孩子在11年级的时候，我不确定他是要考哪一个水平的英语，他是考第一语言吗？他是考第二语言吗？还是他一定要考文学吗？其实这些都是到了我们等到他们11年级考完预考之后呢，那么就是跟家长见面的时候呢，相关的英语老师就会建议家长或者学生呢，应该决定就是选择那个最有利于孩子们的那一个考试了。好吗？可以是考你就是说不一定要考英语文学的，就是说可能还是考第一语言英语罢了，或者甚至是如果他的第一语言觉得说比较吃力的话，那么我们就会建议他们考第二语言的英语了，就这么样。Okay, over to you, Miss Asrin.
Terima kasih Mr. Ng. So berdasarkan apa yang Mr. Edward beritahu tadi, setiap pelajar, setiap tahun pelajar, tahun 7, tahun 8, tahun 9 dan tahun 10 akan belajar satu novel dan juga mereka juga akan belajar puisi dan mereka juga akan belajar teks bukan sastra dan bukan fiction. So apa yang kami tulis di sini, pelajar tahun 7 mereka akan belajar novel The Jungle Book, Romeo dan Juliet puisi, mereka juga akan belajar teks bukan sastra dan bukan fiction. Bagi pelajar tahun 8 pula, mereka akan belajar novel, Holes dan juga Macbeth, Poisonous Poetry, teks bukan sastra dan bukan fiction. Bagi pelajar tahun 9, mereka akan belajar novel Animal Farm, A Streetcar Named Desire, Pop and Poetry, puisi dan juga teks bukan sastra dan bukan fiction. Bagi pelajar tahun 10 iaitu year 10, mereka akan belajar novel Life of Pi, Journey's Ends, puisi, Songs of Ourselves, puisi dan juga teks bukan sastra dan bukan fiction. Bagi pelajar tahun 11, pelajar yang akan menduduki IGCSE, pelajar akan membuat keputusan sama ada mereka akan ambil sastra bahasa Inggeris maupun komponen bahasa Inggeris selepas mereka duduki peperiksaan percubaan pada bulan Januari tahun hadapan. Terima kasih. Back to you, Mr. Edward.
Thank you so much. Okay, so now we can move on to the questions phase. So I think with the number of people we have, the easiest way might be is if you have any questions to send them in the chat. If you're struggling with the chat, then maybe you could shout out or raise your hand. Otherwise, any questions, please do let us know in the chat. Yeah, I think I'll pass it over to our guests now. maybe some people are typing. Yeah. I want to mention something else here. Yes, sorry, just while people are kind of formulating some questions, year 11, as you can see, we don't actually study any texts specifically because the 10 and 11 year is one course. So we finish the texts in year 10, and in year 11, we really focus on the first language and exam technique for the literature exam. We obviously also recap all of the texts quite a lot to prepare them for the literature exam in June for when they do their GCSEs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Edward. I'm sure there's one or two people who are typing a question in right now, so we'll just wait to see if they pop up. And then Mr. Ong and Ms. Asri, if you could just translate as well, if there are any questions. I'll just hand over to you in a moment. Just to underline what Mr. Edward said, in regards to English provision here at school, we really fuse literature and the skills together. It's important, obviously, in regards to develop the skills, but also really helps students develop their fluency in English, not just preparing for the exam, but for the workplace and for university after they leave us here at SEH. Engaging with text really helps them understand the nuances of the language, and therefore they're very adapted to the real world once they leave the school setting. So again, if there are any questions, Mr. Ong, Ms. Asrin, if you just take the questions.
Perfect. And if there aren't any questions, yeah, please feel free to go and enjoy your evening. I will happily stay here until, in case any questions come up. But yeah, if not, thank you so much for coming. And I hope you have a lovely evening. Again, as you can see, you have my email here. So if you do have any questions in the future, please do just send me an email. I'm more than happy to answer them. I know there was a little bit of confusion as to how we did things and why we did things the way that we do. Just again, to reiterate what Mr. Jeff has said, the literature and the language hybrid is really, really helpful to help students develop just beyond that basic level of understanding of English and English skills. Introducing students to a variety of texts will really help them even when they're moving on to study things like engineering and maths. It will really help them with critical thinking, developing arguments, developing their thought processes, creating structures, etc., etc. Okay. So again, if there's no other questions, please feel free to go and enjoy your evening. And please do let me know if you have any questions in the future. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Edward. Mr. Ong and Ms. Asrin, can you just translate this quickly for the audience, please? Understand people are very busy, so a lot of people may not have been made it tonight. This video will be posted onto the school YouTube channel. So for those attending, if you know somebody who wasn't able to make it, they'll be able to access the content on the school YouTube channel. So Mr. Ong and Ms. Asrin, if you could just translate that message quickly. And then Mr. Edward, I think a question did pop up.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, just to answer them in order, you said, my child is struggling with English. Is there any support from school? Yes, we have support across the board. We have something I've not mentioned here is we have EAL support and ESL support. EAL stands for English as an Additional Language. We have both an intensive program where students go full-time into English to support going from the beginner level up to the intermediate level where they are ready to enter mainstream classes again. If you're familiar with CEFR, we have an A1, A2 and B1 course. Students should be about B1 level by the time they enter mainstream. So students are diagnosed and assessed by all teachers across the school, and if there's any concern, that information is passed on to myself and Ms. Sham, the EAL lead, and then we try to help support the students with teachers and within class as well. Is this kind of what you're referring to? Is this kind of English in general, or are we talking about the English language and English literature exam? Just to cover the English language and English literature as well, of course, we have booster classes and we have the teachers themselves who will work directly with students that struggle with language and with literature. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, please feel free to send a follow-up there. Okay, just looking at the second question. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Again, the reading is very, very strong with our students. They have excellent reading skills. I think this also comes across from their development in humanities and other languages. If we just look at the recent assessment week, the reading is incredibly strong. The writing is where we do need to practice the most. One of the big issues with giving, I've had parents in the past suggesting giving just lots and lots of writing. Students do get very burned out very quickly. It is quite long essays they're expected to do, 500 plus words. So we don't want to overburden them. However, they do do a piece of writing on average about every 2 weeks, as well as developing the other skills. So there's plenty of chance for them to, first of all, assess themselves, assess each other and look at each other's work, and then have some feedback from us, from the teachers. So I completely agree that, especially over lockdown, we were lacking a little bit in writing. And so we want to really, really push that, because that's where students tend to, across the world, tend to lose the most marks, and where they struggle the most, where they lack in confidence. So it's a great suggestion. So thank you very much for that. Absolutely, yeah. So again, the emphasis on spoken English and on verbal English and general kind of English competency really depends on the different classes. We do stream our classes based on the students' needs. And so if we're looking at spoken English, if they are in, for example, set 1, there wouldn't be so much emphasis on English communication, because our students tend to be quite strong there. That being said, even though there's no speaking English for the exam, we still do spend a huge amount of time working on presentations, working on social skills, working on communication skills, so that students can develop all of those skills. If you're looking at students that are likely to sit the ESL exam, that actually has a component of the exam is the oral. And so 1/4 of the time would be spent on speaking. Obviously, there's also a listening. So, we do 50-50 between reading and writing, 50-50 on speaking and listening. Again, this would depend on the needs of the students. So that if students are really struggling, then we would focus a lot more on what they need help with. Again, as you'll see in the class, even in students that will sit the first language or even the literature paper, a lot of them may be very uncomfortable or shy. So we do want to try to build that confidence in speaking as well. Similarly, with things like spelling and grammar, that would depend on the needs of the student and which class they are in. Again, in the top set, the students don't tend to need so much grammar support and spelling support, and we can focus on kind of analytical skills, whereas those in other sets may require a great deal more input from the teacher on how to develop their spelling, pronunciation, vocabulary, etc. Again, I hope that's answered your question. Please do send a follow-up if I've gone off topic.
OK， 如果哪一位家长有什么问题的话，你们想要请教 Mr. Edward、Mr. Jeff， 我本身或者 Mr. Ashwin 的话，你可以把你的问题留在这一边，好吧？我们会尽我们的能力解答你的问题。那么刚才 Mr. Jeff， 我们的中学校长也有提到，那么这一个环节呢，将会作为一个就是我们已经将其呢记录下来了。那么你们过后可能要参考回的话，或者你们有更多的问题，或者有更进一步的问题想要请教 Mr. Edward 的话，也可以把信息发给他。或者如果你觉得说你用中文来沟通的话比较方便你的话，那么你可以将问题发给我，那么我就会通过我这一边呢转达给 Mr. Edward， 或者是甚至是 Mr. Jack 知道了，好吗 ？Over to you, Miss Ashwin.
Terima kasih Mr. Eng. Sebarang pertanyaan, saya rasa Mr. Edward lebih peka dan lebih teliti untuk menjawab apa-apa soalan daripada ibu bapa. So sebarang pertanyaan saya rasa boleh tuju kepada Mr. Edward untuk pertanyaan lebih lanjut. Terima kasih. Anything you want to add, Mr. Edward?
No, that's, I think, everything. I've not spoken a huge amount about the EAL support. So for any parents here that have students or have children that are in need of EAL support, English as an additional language, we do have varying levels for that, where students will have support based on their needs. And again, we have the intensive course, as I mentioned, which is was a 5-week program, which really boosts them. But we also have pull-out classes where they're removed from subjects such as art just to try to boost their English as well. So there is lots of different support depending on their needs. Other than that, I think I've covered most of the information I wanted to cover. So again, if you have any other questions, please feel free to either send them in the chat or send me an email. I'm more than happy to respond. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Edward. I think if there are no other questions, that'll conclude the info session this evening. Again, it's been recorded. It'll be posted on the YouTube channel. We'll stick around here for another minute or two if there is a question. But if you don't have any questions, please feel free to leave the room and have a lovely evening. It is, as always, any questions or concerns, just get in touch with Mr.